As soon as I opened our front door, the smell of freshly baked bread and cinnamon filled my nostrils. I kicked off my shoes and ran to the kitchen, still soaked from the rain that poured on me while biking home. My mom was brushing the powdered sugar off her hands on her apron, and a loaf of bread was cooling on a rack next to a slightly opened window. "Hi, honey, how was school?" my mom asked me, pushing some of the hair on my forehead back and planting a kiss on my forehead. "Mom," I said, annoyed that she still did that as if I were a kid. "What did you bake?" I asked as she grabbed a plate and a knife to slice the bread. "It's a regular loaf of bread, but I made a cinnamon swirl that I hope shows in every slice. I wanted to try it out before adding it to the menu," she said as she made a few slices, the swirl showing perfectly in each one. Moments like these were when I marveled at our home. Although outside it was dark, stormy, and pouring rain, the yellow lighting of our kitchen, the warmth and the smell of cinnamon made me close my eyes and enjoy the moment. We sat at the kitchen island with our slices of bread and drinks. I dipped my bread in hot cocoa and snickered at my mom muttering something about me ruining her masterpiece. "What's wrong, honey? You look worried," she asked when I was suddenly deep in thought. Earlier that day, our history teacher told me that if I didn't ace the following tests, I was going to fail his class. "It's school stuff. You wouldn't understand," I sighed. "Boy, I had you when I was a high school junior. You don't think I'll understand trouble at school?" She chuckled at me. I explained to her that I was failing history and that my teacher wasn't lenient at all, and that I could fail the year if I did bad and struggled despite putting in extra work. "Well, there's a parent-teacher meeting soon. I could go talk to him," she said, immediately making me feel better. If anyone could convince my teacher of going easy on me, it was my mom, most persuasive person in the world. The day of the parent-teacher meeting came, and I stopped by my mom's bakery to ask her if she was still going. The familiar bell rang as I opened the door. Julie, a girl who worked for my mom, was at the cash register. "Hey, Jules," I greeted her when I came in. She gave me a small wave as she handed a customer her change. "Busy day?" I asked. "The morning had me spinning. Your mom's cinnamon swirl thing was a huge success, and now people are getting food to bribe teachers at the school later." "Where's Mom?" I asked. "Baking her bribe in the back," she said, turning back to count some money in the cash register. I walked past her and into the kitchen where Mom was putting a batch of cookies in the oven. "Are those?" I began, but they were my favorite marshmallow brownie cookies. Mom was wearing a pair of jeans and a red blouse. I noticed she had curled her hair a bit and put on heels instead of her usual sneakers. She looked much more like a mom now than she did usually, but she looked like the kind of mom that distracts your friends. We talked in the kitchen for a while, until the oven beeped. The cookies were placed in a basket, and Mom made her way towards the school. I was watching a movie in the living room and eating popcorn when Mom finally got home. Hours had passed since the time the meeting should have ended, and I was beginning to worry. She kicked off her heels immediately, sighing in relief, and she stumbled towards the couch, plopping down next to me. She told me the meeting went well and that they went out for drinks afterwards. She asked him to help me out a bit, and he agreed, to my relief. "He also told me you're pretty distracted with Adrian," she said. "I know he's failing too, and I know how close you two are, so I asked Mr. Harrison to help him out too." I immediately texted my best friend to tell him the good news, and he was thrilled. At school, Mr. Harrison was suddenly nicer to me. He smiled at me in the halls, complimented me, and went easy on me when grading my tests. I also caught him smirking in my direction sometimes, but I ignored it. My best friend Adrian was also being treated better by Mr. Harrison. Mom was suddenly swatting my hand away when I reached for an extra muffin and stuff like that, saying they were for Bruce. She started properly dating Mr. Harrison. Sometimes I'd come home from Adrian's and I'd finish them watching a movie on the couch all cuddled up. It upset me a lot, but I realized my father was never in the picture and Mom hadn't had a boyfriend since high school. Plus, she seemed happy, so I got over it. One night, she told me she was going on a date with Bruce, so I asked Adrian to come over for a sleepover. We played video games in the living room for hours until we popped in a movie and I fell asleep in the middle of it. I woke up around 2 in the morning and didn't see Adrian, but I noticed the kitchen light was on. I rubbed my eyes and started walking towards it, but I heard voices. It was my mom and Adrian. I started eavesdropping. "I just wanted to thank you for talking to Mr. Harrison for me," Adrian said, but in a weird way. I knew this voice he was making. It was the voice he used when he was flirting with girls. "It was no problem, Adrian. "You're Jackson's best friend," my mom said, in a totally normal voice. It was clear that my best friend was flirting with my mom, but she wasn't flirting back. "But seriously, thank you," he repeated, and I could hear him moving. "And as I said," my mom began, "it's no problem at all." Now she sounded different. I recognized this too. She talked to Mr. Harrison like this. I couldn't stand it, so I peeked around the corner and into the kitchen. My mom had her back pressed against the kitchen island, and Adrian was sort of cornering her against it. Mom's hand was on his chest, and since he was a tall guy, she was looking up at him. I noticed Adrian was starting to dip his head down, so I quickly walked into the kitchen. I saw them jump apart, but rubbed my eyes to make it seem like I didn't. "Hey guys, what are you doing up?" I asked in a fake, groggy voice. "Nothing, bud. Just came for some water." Adrian jumped to get a cup and filled it with water, after which he pushed me out of the kitchen and we went back to sleep on the couch. I really didn't feel like talking to him about what I saw, but as he snored next to me, I laid awake, staring at the ceiling. I usually hung out with Adrian at his house because it was nicer, but suddenly we were always at mine. He kept making up excuses for us to go to mine instead of his. And I had a sneaking suspicion that it was because he wanted to see my mom. Every time we were at home, I caught him staring at her and he was trying to find ways to touch her, like passing her a plate and lingering his fingers, or walking past her and putting his hand on her back. I thought it was gross, but I felt that if I brought it up, it would only become more real. One day, I was biking home from the store after Mom sent me to get some baking supplies, and when I came back, I found Adrian mowing the lawn, and he wasn't wearing a shirt. I was so pissed off. I was about to jump him, but then my mom came out of the house and handed him his shirt. "I spilled orange juice on it, and your mom offered to rinse it out so I wouldn't get all sticky," he explained, laughing at the image without context. Not only was Adrian always in my house with Mom, but they started baking together, and soon enough, Adrian was working at the bakery with her after school. I asked him about it, and he said it was weird, but he just replied, "I'm saving up for a new laptop, and your mom offered me the job to help me save up." I hated how he had a logical explanation for everything. Things started hanging. Mom was paying more attention to my friend than to me, and it was really getting on my nerves. Not only that, but school was starting to get bad again. We had a history test, and I was expecting the low B that was my average, but when I saw my marked test, I had a huge F. I glanced over to Adrian, he had a B. I didn't understand why I got such a low grade, so I stayed behind after class to talk to Mr. Harrison. "How did I get an F when my mom told you to help me?" I asked him before he shushed me and rushed to close the door. "Do you have any idea the trouble we'd be in if anyone found out?" he said in his exasperated manner. He answered my question by saying my mom had told him at dinner a few days ago to go harder on me again and instead go easier on Adrian. I was so confused. Was Mom picking him over me? I was furious, so I stormed out of the classroom and grabbed my bike. I biked a few blocks until I reached my mom's bakery, where I knew she would be. I was ready to confront her about her thing with Adrian as I burst through the door, but the front of the store was empty. I figured she must be in the kitchen, so I stalked to the back and swung the door open, only to find my mom kissing my best friend. My mom gasped when she saw me and pushed Adrian off of her, rushing towards me, but I slammed the door before she could get to it and sped home as fast as I could. I avoided my mom and Adrian for weeks after I caught them. I snuck out of the house before Mom woke up and came back very late or when I knew she wasn't home. I avoided Adrian like the plague at school, not even bothering to hide it. I was trying to come up with a way to get back at them, or at least get them to stop, because as far as I knew, they were still making out when I wasn't looking. My history grade started to go up, so I guess I got that out of it, but it wasn't enough. I was packing up my stuff after history one day when Mr. Harrison asked me to stay behind because he wanted to talk. He sat on his desk, fidgeting nervously as I waited for him to just spit it out. Then he finally did. He wanted to ask my mom to marry him, but didn't know how to do it. "Is there anything she finds romantic? Something special?" He looked nervous and excited. I felt kind of bad for the guy. At that moment, I felt like a light bulb popped up above my head, and I had a plan. As soon as I got home, I started working on it. 2 days later, Mr. Harrison went to order a very special cake, my mom's favorite, on the bakery's website. When he went to the other tab to pay for it, the bakery's new logo popped up. It read, "Nothing better than a cake and a kiss with your son's best friend." Not only did my mom get dumped, but Adrian failed history. which led to him failing the year. Serves them right. "Ooh, your girlfriend is so pretty, Asher. What's her name?" my annoying sister said as she crept up behind me. I was at my computer looking at pictures of gorgeous celebrities. "This isn't my girlfriend. Get out of my room, you pest," I said. "You'll never have a girlfriend anyway. You're too ugly," she replied while running out of my room. She was little, but I guess she was right. Not about the ugly part, but about me not ever having a girlfriend. Although I was already 18 years old, I'd never had a girlfriend. This was my choice, though. I found the girls my age too immature, needy, and boring. I watched my friends get into petty, ridiculous arguments with their girlfriends, and I just shuddered at the thought of me having to go through the same thing. They got upset over everything. If you didn't text them good morning, if you didn't call them during the day to ask how they were, if you didn't help them carry their bags, if you didn't tell them they were pretty at least 10 times a day. I mean, the list is exhausting. But before I continue, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. You know who I did have crushes on, though? Older women. I found most of my female teachers super attractive. The older, the better. I even had a thing for the principal. I'd look at random women on the street and fantasize about them too, even my mom's friends. Of course, I was too young to ask any of them out, so I just went through high school having the most boring love life ever. After high school, I worked for a year, then got accepted into my dream college. The week before I was supposed to go, I organized a hike for me and my friends. We would climb the highest mountain in our state, then have a picnic on the summit. I figured it was more adventurous than having a lame old goodbye party. We were having an amazing time until my best buddy Greg dared me to run back down the mountain at full speed. This mountain was slippery and covered with sharp rocks, and in retrospect, Greg probably meant it as a joke, but I'm no coward. I ran for about 20 minutes. I stopped for a while to catch my breath and then started again. Suddenly, I felt myself flying. Then, everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by worried faces. "Asher, darling," cried my mom as she saw my eyes open. "What happened to me?" I asked. "I'm not sure, but your friends found you blacked out in the bushes. How do you feel?" she said. I hadn't thought about it until that point. I was in extreme pain. I couldn't feel the lower half of my body, and I felt like my arm was broken. "I feel awful. What happened to me?" I asked. At that moment, a doctor walked in. "Hi, Asher. Both of your legs are broken, and you won't be able to use one of your arms for a while." "What on earth were you doing?" he said. I was just running. I don't really know what happened," I replied. He looked disappointed. My parents stayed with me until visiting hours were over. I stayed in that hospital for a few weeks, and I hated it. The food was terrible, and I missed my room. I eventually decided to persuade my parents to take me home. "But who will take care of you?" my mom asked. "We could hire a nurse. I already have someone in mind," my dad said. "Okay, well, if you're sure about that, then fine," my mom replied. "Thanks, Mom and Dad," I said while trying to hop off my bed, completely forgetting that I couldn't move. My first night back home, I was filled with horrible thoughts. Don't get me wrong, I was happy to be home, but my injury meant that I'd have to change so many of my plans. First, I wouldn't be able to go to college that year. Would I even be well enough to walk the next year? I had no idea. I wouldn't be able to go where I wanted, play sports, or have much fun. I fell asleep and had more nightmares about how much my life would suck in the coming months. I woke up to the breeze blowing softly on my cheeks and the birds chirping outside. I felt grateful for a second, and then I was filled with depressing thoughts about my terrible life again. Suddenly, my bedroom door opened. "Asher, honey, I'd like to introduce you to someone special. This is Denise, your nurse. She'll be taking care of you while your dad and I leave for work during the week," my mom said. In walked the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen in my life. Think of the hottest woman you've ever met and multiply that by 100. That's how hot she was. I stared in shock, and for a while, I felt like my face was broken too. "Hi, Asher. I'm so happy to meet you," she said. "Hi," I said. I was way too shy to say anything else. A week passed, and I hadn't said much to her. She stayed with me during the day and took very good care of me. She'd bring me my meals, and sometimes she'd tell me funny stories too. I wasn't very responsive because I was nervous as hell. When she left at night, I'd fantasize about her until she came back the next morning. I wished we could have something more, but I didn't know how to tell her. I told myself that I needed to become more friendly. So the next week, I did just that. I told her stories too, and it was easy to make her laugh. She told me she was married with 3 children and on the verge of divorce. But that didn't matter to me. It only meant that she was more mature and that soon she would be completely mine. I was pretty sure I could be a good stepdad too. When I felt more comfortable with her, I'd leave her little poems and tell her how beautiful she was every day. She blushed every time. When I was strong enough to move to the living room, we'd watch movies and eat popcorn together. "Oh, Asher, you are wise beyond your years." "Are you sure you're only 18? She laughed one day. "I am," I said while gazing into her eyes. For a minute, it seemed as if she was lost in my eyes too. And then, in a flash, we were kissing. I couldn't believe this was really happening. "Oh my gosh," I said as we pulled away. "Did you have feelings for me all this time too?" I asked. "From the moment I laid eyes on you," she replied. "I know that your situation at home is a bit complicated, but would you consider being my girlfriend?" I asked. "I thought you'd never ask," she responded. So there it was. I was in a relationship with a much older woman, a hot nurse, the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen in my life. My legs were broken, but I felt like the luckiest man in the universe. Later, I started going to a physiotherapist, and I started to gain my strength in my legs. Eventually, I was able to walk with a cane, but Denise still came over to take care of me while my parents were away. One morning after breakfast, my mom said, "Asher, you're almost better. Do you still need a nurse? I think it's time we let her go. You're able to fend for yourself now." "No!" my dad and I shouted at the same time. My mom looked very confused. "It's a lot of added expense that we don't really need right now. We're not done paying the mortgage for this house, and we have to deal with our car payments as well as your hospital bills. It's too much. Today is her last day," she said. I sighed. My dad looked disappointed too, but I didn't know why. I decided I needed to come up with a plan, and quick. Denise is here because I got into an accident. How can I get her to stay longer? Aha, that's it. I can hurt myself badly, so my mom has no choice but to let her stay, I thought. When Denise came, my mom broke the news to her. She looked crushed. "Don't worry," I whispered and winked. We had a romantic day together. I had a long nap, and when I woke up, I wasn't sure where Denise was. It was time to execute my plan. I walked to the top of the staircase and threw myself all the way down. I blacked out and woke up in the hospital again. It was like deja vu. I had only broken one arm and bruised my head really badly, but my mom agreed to allow Denise to stay for 2 more weeks. I was ecstatic. I went home feeling accomplished. The next day, Denise brought me my favorite blueberry cheesecake. We sat and spoke for hours. I couldn't stop staring at her beauty, and I felt so happy that I was getting to spend more time with her. She gazed into my eyes, and we kissed. I heard some noises downstairs, but I paid no attention to them. I was too lost in her embrace. Then, we heard a loud bang on my bedroom door, which was wide open. "What the hell is going on here?" my dad shouted. "I brought you into my house to take care of my son, and here you are making out with him? You make me sick," he continued. "Dad, no, it was me. Please don't blame her," I pleaded. Suddenly, my dad burst into tears. "Why are you crying, Dad?" I asked. He walked up to Denise and held her face in his hands. "How could you do this to me, sweetheart? I thought that what we had was special. But you're cheating on me with my son. How could you do this to me?" he cried. "I'm so sorry, darling. You know I love you, but I also have something special with Asher," she replied. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak, and apparently we were so lost in the moment that we didn't hear my mom walking up the stairs. She walked into my room curiously. "What's all this commotion about?" she asked. She was holding a glass of water which fell to the floor as she stood in shock. "Gregory, why are you holding the nurse's face in your hands?" she said. Honey, I'm so sorry. I've been meaning to talk to you about this. I'm so sorry that I hid it for such a long time, but I've been having an affair with Denise. She was my high school girlfriend, and when she came to work here, we started seeing each other again, and it was just magical. It's why I suggested her in the first place. She's getting a divorce soon, and I will move in with her and the kids, he said. But that's what she told me. I'm moving in with her, I screamed. What? My mom asked in confusion. I think it was too much for her, so she walked out. I'm sorry to both of you, said the nurse. The truth is, I'm not leaving my husband. I just wanted to have a bit of fun, but I'm very devoted to him and to my family. I'm sorry I put you all through this. I love you both, she said, and walked out of the door too. My father and I stared at each other blankly. So much was going through my mind. I'd lost the love of my life, and now my family was about to fall apart. A month later, everything had changed. My mom got a divorce from my dad, who went to live on his own in a cabin near a creek. I stayed with my mom, who was still devastated. I planned to go to college the next year, and I really hoped that things would turn around for me. I suppose I should give younger women a chance. What do you think?
Hi, I'm Mason, and I had a secret relationship with my hot doctor. It all started a few months ago when I began feeling ill. I'd always hated doctors and hospitals, so I tried to avoid them as often as I could. I was going to college, but living with my mother to save money. At first, I didn't tell her anything about my symptoms, since I knew she tended to overreact when it came to my health. We lost my dad when I was a young boy, and my mother never really got over the sorrow. He'd gotten really sick, and there was nothing the doctors could do to save him, so it was only natural if my mother became overly concerned when it came to illness. My childhood wasn't what you would call normal. Ever since my father passed away, my mom began fearing she'd lose me as well, the only family she had left. So she clung on to me and made sure nothing bad ever happened. She was overprotective, didn't let me play outside, and had me clean my hands almost obsessively. She'd take me to the hospital every time I as much as sneezed or coughed, and insisted that I missed class if any of my friends got sick. It was as if she wanted me to live in this little bubble where nothing wrong could ever happen to me. I loved her to bits, though, since she was amazing. She was kind and tender, and she really did do her best to raise me all on her own. Mom's overprotectiveness also made it hard to date girls as I grew up. She never approved of my relationships, and ended up finding excuses to drive them away, no matter how perfect they might seem to be. When I was accepted into college, we decided I'd remain at home to save up money. That would allow me to avoid student loans, Mom reasoned. The truth of the matter was, our decision wasn't just about money. She didn't feel ready for me to leave, and I didn't want to hurt her. So staying home while I studied seemed like a good compromise. Plus, she helped me out a lot, and paid for part of my tuition. I didn't want to be an ungrateful son. So, knowing how she could get, I decided to try and hide my symptoms when I began feeling sick. It was not worth the headache, and I was sure I could nurse myself back to health, no problem. All I needed was a few cups of tea and a whole lot of sleep. The problem began when the fever didn't go down, even after I took some over-the-counter medication and spent the day in bed. Mom arrived home from work, and she suspected something was amiss. I tried to pretend nothing was wrong, but she didn't believe my lies. I looked pale and exhausted, so she touched my forehead. I had to confess the truth. I was feeling awfully sick, but I tried to insist that it was just the flu. Of course, Mom wasn't having it. She wanted to drive me to the hospital right away. I tried to insist it wasn't necessary, but in the end, she had her way. I was feeling too sick to argue any longer, and she was practically dragging me towards the car. She began driving me, and I shivered miserably on the way there. The fever was getting worse, and I felt incredibly sick. I was stubborn, though, and kept telling her that this was ridiculous, that I would get better in a day or two, and that she should just let me sleep it off. Mom, of course, didn't go back to our home. She parked in front of the hospital and rushed me into the ER. I followed behind miserably and sighed as I answered the receptionist's questions. My mom and I sat down in the ER's waiting room, and I groaned as we waited. I told her I'd be better off curled up in bed, warm and resting comfortably, instead of waiting forever in that cold room. Mom patiently listened to my protest, but she still insisted we stayed until the doctor saw me. I was growing more and more frustrated until someone called my name. When I looked up, I was stunned. Standing a few feet away from us was the most gorgeous woman I had ever laid eyes on. I couldn't believe it. She was perfect from head to toes. Her hair was long and wavy, her face flawless, her body incredible. She was dressed in blue scrubs that matched her eyes. I could barely speak at all and must have looked like a mumbling fool. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Vanessa, and I had to try and remember my own name. I think that my mom was the one who told her my name. Dr. Vanessa asked me to follow her into one of the examination rooms while Mom waited outside. I felt my fever higher than ever and my heartbeat beating in my ears. I thought those were signs that I was falling in love, but in reality, it was my body reacting to the illness. I was getting worse by the minute, but too distracted by my doctor's beauty. I ended up getting admitted into the hospital. Mom didn't waste any time letting me know that she was right. Dr. Vanessa was the doctor in charge of my case, and that made my stay at the hospital far more pleasant. I would make silly jokes whenever she walked into the room, even when I was feeling awful. She made me smile even through the pain and the fever. She was friendly and brilliant. At first, I thought she was just being nice because she was a good doctor and I was sick. But little by little, I could feel something beginning to grow between us. Dr. Vanessa would stay longer than she needed to in my room. When I began getting better, thanks to the medications, we would talk and talk. I wanted to know everything about her. I was surprised to discover that not only was she new to the area, but she was still in the process of moving into her new apartment. She was staying in a hotel room while some issues with her new home were solved. When I asked what neighborhood she was moving into, she said the name of the area I lived in. We ended up discovering that we were going to be neighbors. We were both stunned. It was such a big coincidence. To me, this felt like destiny, like I had been meant to get sick and to be her patient. Why else would she be moving right next door to me? And we also had this amazing connection. I refused to believe that all of that was simply a coincidence. When I told her this, though, she looked worried. She told me that she did like me, but that I was her patient and she couldn't date me. It wouldn't be ethical, and she could get in trouble. Plus, I was still sick and had to focus on recovering. I was determined not to give up, but I told her I understood. I didn't have to rush things since we'd be living next door to one another. I would keep seeing her after I left the hospital. So if she didn't want to date a patient, then I'd simply wait until I wasn't her patient any longer. Of course, being that patient was easier said than done. I tried to remain friendly and avoid flirting. I really did. Soon enough, though, I was asking her on a date. She told me no the first time, and the second time as well. By the third time, Dr. Vanessa laughed and scolded me for being so persistent. She ended up saying she'd go out with me once I was released. Imagine my excitement. It took me a couple more days to actually get better, and it felt like an eternity. We kept flirting all the time, but we never kissed, not until I left the hospital. That night, she invited me over to her apartment. It was incredible to have her right next door, just a few feet away from me. We spent the night together, and I felt like I was in heaven. I was dating the most beautiful woman I had ever met. She was also smart and funny. Vanessa was 10 years older than me, but we didn't care about that. I was studying to become an architect, and I'd be graduating in less than a year. It wasn't as if I was a teenager or anything of the sort. Problem remained with my mother. I knew she would freak out if she knew that I was dating my doctor. It didn't matter if I was no longer her patient. I knew what my mom would say about the whole situation. What would happen if she reported Vanessa to the medical board? I didn't want to get my girlfriend in trouble for dating me. So at first, we decided we'd keep it a secret from those around us. My mom didn't like me staying out all night, but I was old enough that she couldn't tell me not to leave. She did ask many questions, and I tried to avoid giving her incriminating answers. I just told her I was studying late or that I had found a study group. I never let her know that I was dating someone. At least, not until Vanessa and I decided that our relationship was serious, and we would want to take it to the next level. She asked me to move in with her, and I immediately said yes. We were so happy and eager to live together, of course, but I was also worried. This meant I had to let my mother know what was going on. Vanessa and I decided we'd tell her the news together. Mom was very surprised to see my doctor in our living room when she got home from work. She freaked out and asked if I was sick again. I explained that I was healthy and Vanessa wasn't there as a doctor. She was there as my girlfriend. Mom got so angry. She asked how long we had been seeing each other, and I couldn't lie to her any longer. We let her know that we fell in love for each other while she was still my doctor. Mom did not take it well at all. She accused Vanessa of taking advantage of her position. Vanessa explained that she knew it had been wrong, but that we had really fallen in love. It took some time, but we managed to convince her not to make any complaints to the hospital. That was a big relief for me, since I knew Vanessa could have been fired. Mom can be really overprotective, but she's not a cruel woman. She knew that doing that would have been wrong. I'm living with Vanessa now, and my mom is slowly starting to accept our relationship. It's not been an easy journey, but it's all been worth it. Vanessa is the most wonderful woman I've ever met. I can't imagine my life without her. And though Mom's still not too happy about me moving out, she's relieved at least that I live next door to her. I had to make her promise not to come knocking every single day, though. I still get sick from time to time, but Vanessa was able to convince me hospitals aren't so terrible. I don't need to rush to the ER, though. I have my own family doctor right at home. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos on the channel.
Hello, my name is Alan, and I have a confession to make. I have a secret relationship with my hot teacher. I was really lucky as a child. I would always be one of the most popular kids in school. I also had the best grades every single year. I had it really easy. It was a breeze going through primary and middle school. Even high school was easy at first. I got along with most everyone, and girls thought I was handsome. So I even got dates whenever I wanted, and always got picked first during gym class. My parents were not so laid back as I was, though. They were really strict and would never be happy with anything less than perfection. That made the time I spent at school so much better than the one I spent with them at home. When I was in school with my friends, everything was perfect. Teachers loved me. Everyone wanted to hang out with me, and I had so much fun. During lunch break, I'd sit with my best friends and joke around. I did well in every single class, and, though I studied, I didn't have to struggle with any subject. However, when I arrived home, my parents began bugging me. Every single small detail had to be perfect in our home. That meant I had to make my bed every morning, eat everything they cooked no matter if I didn't like it, and get nothing but straight A's. Even a B was unacceptable, and I'd be grounded for a long time. Imagine if I were to arrive home with an F. My parents would have killed me. They got mad if my clothes were dirty or my room wasn't always spotless. I mean, they clearly loved me and cared for me deeply. I understand they were raising me the best way they knew how, but it was a bit too much for me. I felt like I never had any leeway when it came to my parents. Mistakes simply weren't permitted. You can imagine the stress I was put through every single day, so it's no wonder I preferred being at school, or that I found any excuse to spend time in my friends' homes. I tried talking to my parents about it, but they explained that they knew best and that one day I'd understand, and I'd be really grateful then. I thought they were ignoring my feelings, and that led me to making the first big mistake of my young life. I wanted to rebel against them a bit, and that's when I began hanging out with the wrong crowd at school. It happened when my parents decided to move us to the other side of the country, without even asking what I felt about it. One day, Mom announced she had gotten a great job offer and that we'd be moving in a week's time. I had to give up everything I had in my hometown, my friends, my girlfriend, everything I had known. I told them I didn't want to start anew during my senior year at high school, but they told me it was for the best. We'd be living in a bigger house and have more money to enjoy our free time. The problem was that with my parents, I rarely had free time, not if they were around. So when I started my senior year in a brand new city and a brand new school, I decided I wanted to do something different, something that would annoy my parents. I began hanging out with groups of teenagers I'd never been around before. They were rebellious and never studied. They also would drink, even if they were underage. Clearly not the kind of friends any parent wants their child to have. They were always talking back to the teachers and skipping class. I felt they were so cool, and they gave me the freedom to actually make mistakes. I now understand how much I was messing with my future by hanging out with them, but back then it didn't matter to me. I let myself be influenced by them, and I stopped making an effort as well. They prompted me to skip class with them, and we'd spend the whole day doing nothing, just hanging around, talking and drinking. I was really a mess. Looking back, I can't believe I let them pressure me into everything I did during that year. My parents were worried and forbade me from hanging out with these students, but I didn't listen. Mom and Dad were working so hard that they struggled to keep me in check as they had until we moved. My grades got so bad that even with my previous history, I wouldn't be graduating at the end of the school year. When my teacher told me this, I completely freaked out. It was one thing to hang out with a few slackers, but if my parents realized I wasn't going to be graduating, they'd kill me. I met with the school's principal and begged for a second chance. I explained how I had ambitions to get into a top-tier college, and up until that year, I had the grades and behavior to achieve it. He looked at my record and agreed that I had been an amazing, hardworking student up until I began hanging out with the wrong crowds. He explained that I would be given a chance to make up for the credit I was missing, but I wouldn't get a third chance. If I didn't get it right this time, it was game over. I immediately agreed and promised I would work really hard. So it was decided that I should stay after school and recover the credit I was missing. If I managed to show improvement before the school year was over, then I'd be able to graduate with the rest of my class, and it wouldn't affect my grades. This meant that I could actually get into a great college and make my parents proud after all. I felt so relieved, but annoyed at the same time. I didn't really feel like staying late every single day and missing anything fun. After all, I wouldn't have the time to hang out with friends or relax at all. However, I was the one who messed up, and this was the only way to avoid ruining my future. I couldn't allow a few mistakes to mess everything I was supposed to do with my life. As annoyed as I might be with my parents' strict attitudes, they were right in a way. I wasn't going to let a single year ruin all the effort I had put into my studies over time. So I ended up agreeing. What I could have never imagined was that I would meet the love of my life in that after-school program. I walked into the classroom, and there she was, perfect from head to toes, the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen. I must have stared openly at her, because she laughed and asked me to take a seat. Her laughter was stunning, and I couldn't help but smile at her like a fool. I was instantly smitten by her. I realized right that instant that love at first sight was absolutely real. She had dark brown hair and big green eyes. Her smile was beautiful, and she was so sweet and caring. She introduced herself as Miss Samantha Riley. Samantha really did care about her students. She wasn't there to roll her eyes at us and wait until the program was over. Other teachers didn't seem to mind if we learned or not. She asked me why I had to take these classes, and I explained the mistakes I had made. I told her all about how my parents were so strict and how I just wanted to rebel once in my life. I knew I had messed up and wanted to fix it, so it wouldn't affect my future. Surprisingly, she understood completely. Samantha told me she didn't believe that a student should be judged by just a handful of grades. She always focused more on the overall effort they had made through the year. I was so relieved and felt like I had found someone I could confide in. So, as the days went by, we began growing really close to each other. Samantha loved talking to me. She helped me study and complete my homework. She also wanted to know about me and my life. She wanted to be there for me, and I fell more and more in love with her as time went by. I wanted so badly to be her boyfriend, but I couldn't imagine a woman like her paying any attention to me. She would confide in me, though, telling me about her problems with her student loans. Samantha had graduated 3 years prior. She was really young. I think she was only 26 when we first met. Every student in school seemed to be in love with the hot young teacher, but she didn't pay them as much attention as she did me. One day, I couldn't stop myself any longer. I confessed my feelings for her and asked her to go on a date with me. She looked surprised at first, and I thought that she would scold me. Instead, Samantha kissed me. I melted in her arms as I kissed her back. It was the best moment of my entire life. Samantha and I talked after that. She explained that she really liked me back, but that we couldn't let anyone know about us. If someone found out, not only would she lose her job, she might also be sent to jail for a long time. I didn't want to get her in any trouble, so of course I promised I wouldn't tell a soul. Samantha and I began seeing each other regularly after school. We also kissed in the classroom when no one else was around. We both knew what we were doing was wrong, but we didn't care. We were madly in love and wanted to spend our whole lives with each other. Sam and I began making plans for after I graduated. She promised she'd move close to the college I ended up being accepted into, and we'd make our love public there. My parents never discovered what was going on with me and Sam. She pretended to be just another teacher to me whenever someone was around. I was one of the few students who claimed she wasn't really that hot. I needed to pretend I didn't like her after all. I wouldn't have been able to hide my feelings for her if I began speaking of how beautiful she was. We've been dating for 3 whole months, and I'll be graduating next week. Thanks to Sam, not only did I earn my missing credit, but I actually improved my grades massively. The principal is really proud of my improvement. He said he would write a recommendation letter for me to send with my college application. I'm a bit worried about graduating because that means soon I'll have to tell my parents about my relationship with Sam. They know her as my teacher, so it's not like I can claim she is someone I met at college. That's going to be a really awkward conversation, but I hope they'll understand. Sam and I are in love, and I'm not breaking up with her, no matter what my parents think about our relationship. At least I'll be away at college and not living under their roof. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
Hi, my name is Kevin, and I'd like to tell you how I met the love of my life. Now, there's something you must know about her straight away. She used to be an exotic dancer. You know the type. They disrobe in front of clients and make everyone in the place very happy. Yes, that is what Lily did for a living, all right. Before meeting her, I thought I was simply too busy to date anyone at all. I worked as a real estate agent and taught private lessons on how to invest their money wisely. I was always earning money, and that made me quite wealthy, but I was also super lonely. Sure, I had friends, but there was something else missing in my life. I refused to accept that I needed a girl to keep me company. I'd always thought that I was above that kind of nonsense, you know? Anyways, to relax after a long day of work, I would usually frequent certain clubs. I didn't feel bad about it. After all, I was single and felt kind of lonely. They gave me an excuse to have a drink, unwind, and enjoy the company of some pretty dancers. A win-win situation, right? My favorite club was the Dirty Pickle. It was classier than its name might suggest, and they made excellent drinks. Plus, the music was half decent, and the company was amazing. All the women there were incredibly beautiful, and they always had big smiles on their faces. They danced most of the time, but sometimes I'd chit-chat with them a bit. Nothing serious, just flirting and bantering in between dances. That all changed when I met the beautiful Lily. When she came over, I almost choked with my drink. She was so stunning. There was something else about her that just stole my breath away. Perhaps it was the way she smiled, or maybe the way she tossed her long hair back. One way or another, I was smitten. I was amazed by her, and I tried talking to her a bit before she actually did some dancing. Usually the dancers don't allow clients to waste too much time talking, but since I paid for the time, they reluctantly accepted it. Eventually, though, I asked her to dance for it and paid her fee. She was far better than all the others in that club, and in any other I had visited. She was so good that I gave her a big tip and asked her for another dance. I think I must have paid for 6 or 7 dances that night and used up all the money I had brought with me that night. I couldn't get enough of her. I started going to the club almost every single night. I couldn't get enough of the beautiful Lily. When she wasn't around, I'd mope around a bit at first. As the weeks went by, I decided that I would only go when she was there. So I asked for her schedule. She was a bit hesitant to give it to me at first, and I can't blame her. I bet there are a lot of creeps who stalked her or bothered her when she was there. Eventually, I earned her trust, and she decided I was all right. So she let me know what nights she'd be at the club, and if her shifts ever changed, she left a note with the bouncers. It took me some time to convince her to give me her number next. At first, I just told her it was so she could text me whenever she was going to be dancing. She didn't really believe that and teased me about it. She called me a schmoozer. I teased her right back, and we always ended up bantering and flirting. It was clear to me that Lily liked me. I know that girls like her have to pretend they fancy the guys they dance for in order to get a nice tip, but that wasn't it. I saw the way she behaved around other guys, and it was nothing like how she smiled when I was around. We had something special, but I understood it wasn't easy for her to admit she had feelings for me. After all, dating while being an exotic dancer wasn't easy. She could get in trouble if I got jealous. It could be a real mess. Anyways, it took me some time and a lot of texts, but eventually she agreed to go out on a date with me after her shift. I paid for dances all night long while I waited for her to be ready to leave. She made some great tips for me that night, I can tell you that much. The date was amazing, the best I've had in years. I began to realize that I might, after all, need some company in my life. Maybe it wasn't so bad to actually have feelings for a beautiful young woman. She tried to pretend that she wasn't into me at first, but when I asked her on a second date, she said yes immediately. We went just about everywhere together from that night on. I would wait till her shift was over, and when she had a day off, she'd sometimes even come over to my house just to hang out. It felt amazing to spend my time with someone I had deep feelings for. I looked forward to getting off work. Even though I kept making a really good living, it was like I could have the best of both worlds, without needing to sacrifice either my professional nor love lives. Lily was so much fun to have around, and she was an amazing kisser. We didn't rush into showing our love for each other physically. I wanted it to be special, and when it finally happened, it really was. After a few weeks of dating this amazing girl, I finally told my friends about her. They weren't really supportive, if I have to be perfectly honest. No matter who I spoke to, they always said the same. My friends and family warned me that I was going to get my heart broken. Some thought she was using me, and others thought I just liked her because she was hot and danced amazingly. I tried to explain to them that our feelings were real, but everyone seemed super skeptical. I can't say I blame them, though. The truth of the matter is, I probably would have told them the same if the tables were reversed. It seemed strange for someone to be seriously dating an exotic dancer. And if I hadn't known Lily as well as I did, then perhaps I would have thought the same about her. But Lily was amazing. She was smart and interesting and so funny. There was so much about her to like. And when she was around me, it seemed like I was the only person that mattered to her. It made me feel special and cherished. I know it might sound silly, but having never been in love before, it was really a big change for me. Eventually, we became more serious. Everything was okay at first. She'd spend a few nights a week at my place, and we'd go to events together. For instance, when one of my cousins got married, she was my date for the party. My aunt wasn't too convinced about having her there, but Lily was perfectly lovely to everyone in my family and soon won everyone over. The truth of the matter was, though, I ended up doing what I promised I wouldn't do. I began feeling jealous of her dancing for others. I loved her dancing for me, but when I saw her with other men, it broke my heart. It was so messed up. I knew what she did for a living. I had met her that way. I used to be a client. So what right did I have to tell her that she needed to quit? Especially after promising her I wouldn't do such a thing. When we first started dating, Lily had a long talk with me. She explained that she had dealt with jealous boyfriends and that she wasn't willing to go through that again. If I couldn't deal with her job, then maybe we weren't meant for each other. I still remembered that conversation, and at first, I tried to keep my promise. I tried so hard, but after some time, it became impossible to keep up pretending I didn't care if she danced for other guys. I got so stressed out and ended up being in a bad mood almost every single day. It was nasty and unfair to both of us, so I decided to be honest with her and finally let her know that I couldn't deal with her work any longer. She got super upset, but that didn't surprise me at all. After all, she had every right to be mad at me. Lily said she knew I would end up doing exactly this and that she couldn't deal with any of it again. She said that maybe it was best if we simply broke up. I tried to make things work. I really did. I suggested she could maybe get a regular job. Lily immediately refused. She told me that she made 3 times as much, working only a few hours every night rather than 8-hour shifts at some store. So after arguing day after day, I finally told her that she didn't need to work at all. I was wealthy enough to support her and help maintain her lifestyle that she had grown accustomed to. Lily seemed reluctant at first. I couldn't blame her. After all, what happened if we ended up breaking up and I didn't feel like supporting her any longer? That was when I realized I had to make a real commitment to her if I wanted to keep her in my life. After all, Lily would be giving up so much for me if she quit her job. I realized that I wanted her to be my partner and my best friend for the rest of my life. So I knelt and popped the question. I had bought an expensive, beautiful engagement ring the day before, and she was so stunned when she saw it. Lily looked so beautiful at that very moment, and I couldn't believe it when she finally said yes. We kissed and hugged, and I took her out for a lavish dinner downtown. She ended up quitting her job the very next day, and we began planning our wedding. I'm not exaggerating when I say it was the happiest day of my life. She was dressed in a long, gorgeous white gown and had never looked more beautiful. We've been married for 4 years now, and I don't regret my decision for a single second. She's gone back to study and is going to be graduating next month. Lily said she wanted to try for a child after she was done with her studies, so I'm really excited about those two things happening. We sure proved my friends and family wrong, and they all adore her now. Actually, I think my mom might even like her more than she does me. She still dances nowadays, but only for me, and she's still amazing at it, by the way. Thanks for watching. Have you ever fallen in love with someone your friends don't approve of? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel. Hey guys, Mark here. Just wanted to make sure you're all aware we now have a Facebook page. The link is down below in the description, so go over there and give it a like or a follow. And if you find these videos entertaining, share it with your friends and family. We'd really appreciate that.